Okay, today we are going to learn about Pythagorean theorem, which is something that you've done all the way back in middle school even. So the first thing that we need to do is with right triangles is always find our hypotenuse first. So that is always going to be the side that is across from the right angle. We'll always find that one first. So in our triangle over here on the right-hand side, again, if I start at my right angle and I find the side that is across from it, think about if I'm going swimming across a lake or whatever, it's the side that's not touching the right angle. Right there, that's going to be my hypotenuse. We can label it HYP. Once I have my hypotenuse, the nice thing about that is always the number that's by itself in our Pythagorean theorem. So it doesn't matter which one's A and B of your other two sides. If you know your hypotenuse, that's all you need to know. And so when I'm going through this first problem, again, my hypotenuse, the one across from the right angle, is 13. And so I know that that's going to be the one that's by itself. So I've got 13 squared on the right-hand side. And then on the other side, I can just square the other two and add them together. So I get 5 squared plus b squared. And so then I can just simplify and then solve my equation. So 5 squared gives me 25 plus b squared equals 13 squared, which I believe is 169. Yep. Then I can just subtract the 25 over to the other side. I get b squared is equal to 144. And then to solve an equation, I can take the square root of both sides and get b is equal to 12. With the second one, again, as I kind of rotate these shapes, just making sure we understand that my hypotenuse, sometimes we always think it's the one that is slanted. Nope, it's always the one that is across from the right angle. So in this case, x is my hypotenuse. So I know that x squared is going to be by itself on the right-hand side. On the other side, I've got 6 squared plus 8 squared. So that gives me 36 plus 64 is equal to x squared. Add those together and get 100, and then divide both sides take the square root of both sides. So I get x is equal to 10. Then with the last one, again, same thing. 15 is my hypotenuse. Find that one first, and everything else is pretty simple from there. A squared plus 12 squared. So I get a squared plus 144 is equal to 225, I believe. 15 squared. Yep. I can then subtract the 144 and get a squared is equal to 81. Take the square root of both sides, and I get a is equal to 9. Same thing with these last two. Go ahead and put an x down. Again, side across from my right angle is my hypotenuse. So that's x squared. Then over here I've got 15 squared plus 8 squared. That's 225 plus 64 is equal to x squared. So 225 plus 64 gives me 289. And then I can take the square root of both sides and get 17. And the last one here, same thing. You can put 26 squared by itself, as that's my hypotenuse. And then on the other side, I've got x squared plus 24 squared. So I get x squared plus 24 squared is 576 is equal to 676. I can then subtract the 576 over to the other side to get x squared is equal to 100. And then I can take the square root of both sides and get x is equal to 10. On the back side of the notes, it's just figuring out whether something is a right triangle or not. So with this, the converse of the Pythagorean theorem tells us that if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, if that gives me the same number on both sides of my triangles, then I know that the triangle has to be a right triangle. And the one thing that we need to know is that this little note right here, the longest side of a right triangle is always going to be our hypotenuse. There's always going to be our c squared. So with the two problems that you have underneath, you can just highlight the two longest sides. Those are going to be our hypotenuse, which is going to be the one that's by itself. So I've got 10 squared, and then on the other side I've got 4 squared plus 8 squared. And all I'm trying to see is if I get the same number on both sides. So I get 16 plus 64 is equal to 100. 64 plus 16 gives me 80 is equal to 100. So that is not true. It's not equal. 80 is not equal to 100. So I know that no, it's not a right triangle. If I would get both numbers to be the same, then I would know that it'd be true. It doesn't happen, so I know that it is not a right triangle. The next one, I get 26 squared. That's my hypotenuse by itself on the right-hand side. And I've got 10 squared plus 24 squared. So I get 100 plus 24 squared gives me 576. And 26 squared gives me 676. So I can add those together to get 676 is equal to 676. And so that's true. And so I know that, yes, this is a right triangle. Whenever you have right triangle whole numbers that are parts of a right triangle, called Pythagorean triples, they're numbers that always satisfy the Pythagorean theorem, so they're always right triangles if they're lengths of a triangle. Last two kind of theorems you have here is just if you have a triangle where it's not right, you can tell based on which is the biggest, which number is bigger, whether it's your hypotenuse is bigger than the other two, or your other two legs are bigger than the other one. You can tell whether it's a acute or obtuse triangle. So with this first one, so again, we're looking at our hypotenuse. If our hypotenuse is bigger than the other two, then my triangle is obtuse. And then on the other one, again, I've got my hypotenuse. If my hypotenuse is smaller, then I know that the triangle is acute. So with each of these, and I always like writing it with A and B on the left-hand side, so just make sure that we understand that what I'm writing here is the same thing as A squared plus B squared is less than C squared. Tells us that it is obtuse. And then if I write it the other way, flip it around, just make sure that your inequality sign flips as well. So if A squared plus B squared is bigger than C squared, then you know that your triangle's acute. So with the last two examples you have here, again, biggest side is my hypotenuse. So I've got 9 squared. Put a little box where I'm going to fill in my inequality sign at the end, and then I've got 7 squared plus 8 squared. Oops. So I get 49 plus 64. And then I've got 81 on the other side. So 49 plus 64 gives me 113. So I know that my inequality sign, 113, is bigger than 81. And so again, that was my A squared and B squared are bigger than the hypotenuse squared. So I know it's going to be like this one. And so I know that my triangle is going to be an acute triangle. Again, just knowing that if my two legs are bigger than the hypotenuse, that means it's going to be an acute triangle. And then same thing here, my 14 is going to be my hypotenuse. So I've got 14 squared, whoops. And on the other side, I've got 6 squared plus 11 squared. So that's 36 plus 121. And 14 squared gives me 190. 96, I think. Yeah. And so again, 36 plus 121 gives me 157. And 196 on the other side. So I know that 196 is bigger. And again, that's my hypotenuse squared. So it's going to look like this one up here where my c squared is bigger than the other two added together. And so I know that this is going to be an obtuse triangle. There we go. And that's it.